Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Bend Chamber webinar series, Impact Webinar Series. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and especially thank Senator Jeff Merkley for joining us today. We are so thrilled to have you here. Before we get started with our conversation, Senator, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping chores. First is to thank our sponsor, Bend Broadband. They've been very, very generous in allowing us to bring these webinars to the whole audience in Bend and to our members as well. And also wanted to point out a few more upcoming activities here in the next couple weeks or so. The next webinar will be with Senator Wyden, and that is on March 30th. And we'll be talking about similar things as Senator Merkley with some other issues that Senator Wyden has been working on specifically. And then on April 6th, please join us for a 1 year after shutdown update on the economy with our own state economists from the Oregon Department of Employment, Damon Renberg, and an economist from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on how the nation is doing in small businesses in their recovery mode since a year ago. So with that, what I'd like to do is just launch right into our conversation. Senator, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's great to be with you. I'm pleased to be able to connect with you all because there's so much going on.
There is, and thank you. I hear you just came off the floor from a vote and probably jogged down the hallway to meet us today. So thank you very much, and you're welcome for getting some exercise.
Yeah, that was the fifth vote out of a series of 6 or 7. One of them may be voice voted, but the first 4 votes were about extending the Paycheck Protection Program for small business, which would otherwise expire if we left here without getting this done. And then the votes we're in right now are related to the Medicare payments not being affected in an adverse fashion. So we're trying to take care of that as well. And I think successfully. It looks pretty good right now. So
That's
going
great.
forward.
Those are some serious issues, and thank you for being there for us. And so I'd like to start a conversation today, Senator Merkley, if it's okay with you. Want to just talk about the American Rescue Act a little bit. What you see coming down the pike. We have a lot of folks very interested in how fast they can get some relief. And so if you could just share some of your insights with maybe how the final decisions came together and what you're doing now to make sure it gets implemented smoothly.
We're going to be providing a lot of feedback to the administration on implementation as we hear from you all about what's working and what isn't. One of the things that we did differently this time around was to send money directly to county and cities rather than doing it through the state. So hopefully that will speed things up on that front. And you all have probably seen these numbers, but our numbers is that the City of Bend will get about 12.5 million, Redmond about 6.4, Lapine about 390. I'm just rounding these off. Sisters about 570. Deschutes County about 38, a little over 38 million. So there are a series of ways these funds can be used, and that was another area we tried to improve on was the flexibility of those funds. So they can be used to replace revenue lost to COVID or any expenses related to COVID. And there'll be more detailed guidance that are coming out of the Department of Treasury. And I'm sure we're going to be posting those on our website. We're going to be working to get clarification because there'll be a question, well, does this qualify? Does this qualify? And Jake Okenberg, as my business liaison, has been doing a lot to help business across the state apply for PPP loans that will turn into grants and idle loans that turn into grants. And that will continue. So with advising in other ways, and in particular on the state and county funds, not on the business accounts, but on the state and county funds, I want to note that BJ Westland is with us, my field rep, who is standing by to assist as those questions come up. And then Allison on the policy side and Terrell are with us. And so many points of communication with my team. And we anticipate a lot of calls because there's so much in this bill. It's going to be so many questions, and our business groups are going to spend a lot of time and effort trying to get clarifications. We're going to try to help with that to get information out to their members. There's a lot more on the business side that is in this bill. You have the additional funding for EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. You have the Restaurant Act, which is very important because so many restaurants were hit so hard during this. The exact amount of money that comes to Oregon, I can't tell you, but generally it'll be about 1%, because we're about 1% of the nation's population. So that would be on the order of about $280 million to help out Oregon's restaurants. The payroll protection program got additional boost of $7 billion. And as I know today, we're working to extend the deadline, make sure it doesn't, there's not a break in it, that it continues to flow effectively. We also did a shuttered venues program specifically because anytime you had to bring a whole group of people together, it was COVID shut it down immediately. So kind of the first to shut down, probably the last to open, really hard hit. And then we also extended the work share program that enables the possibility of bringing people back part-time, so they're covered part-time by their payroll and then part-time by unemployment insurance. I think another business concern is people coming back to work, and a lot of people have found it hard to come back to work because they're doing childcare, because our schools don't have children, or either shut down or partly shut down. And so what you have is a lot of help on childcare in several different programs. I'll delineate it if we in the questions. I won't bother to go into all the pieces now, but there's 3 or 4 major pieces to assist on the childcare front, including a childcare tax credit that will really help very low income families because it's a refundable tax credit. So if you have 2 or 3 children and you're struggling with a single minimum wage job, and then how do you pay for childcare, this will help enormously. The lay of the land is that you also have funding that is designed to help on housing, to help on education, getting our children back into to school. And so you have other funding that will be coming to our K-12 and to our higher education system. We have the direct payments that go to individuals, the unemployment insurance being extended boost to $300 per week, and help on food, homelessness, and as I mentioned, on housing. So a lot, it's so much, it's just almost impossible to digest it. And we're all of us as facilitators are going to be deluged with requests for information. We put up a whole bunch of one-pagers on my website to help get the lay of the land. There'll be a lot more details behind that I know people have questions on, but I hope that's helpful. The big question as we go forward this year is, are we going to have a Build Back Better bill? This is a major infrastructure bill. And we thought we might go to it directly as soon as we'd finish COVID-19. But instead, a lot of work is being done to assemble the bill. I'm taking feedback on everything you can think of that you might want in this bill. This is the time to share it with my team. We anticipate traditional infrastructure, such as funding for projects that are, as the term we used back in the Obama days, shovel ready, right? That overpass, that school that needs to be rebuilt, that public building that needs to be rebuilt, the jetty that needs to be repaired, the dike, the bridge, and so forth. So certainly make sure we have that list in hand. But it will also include things that are less traditional, like rural broadband, because it's essential that everybody in America have access to broadband. We'll also see an energy section that will address assisting the restructuring of our energy system and facilitating a movement from fossil fuels to renewables. It'll probably include things like help with wire transmission lines, that electric transmission lines that connect different grids, so help supply and demand be matched around the country. We wish there was a way to put those underground. There isn't, so they're always controversial, but essentially a part of making sure our grid can stand up to the challenges to come. We will see also some green infrastructure. And one of the things I'm really going to be pushing for are more funds to thin our forests, to mow, to do prescribed burns, because our second growth forests are simply too close together, too clogged with too many fuels. And if we don't reduce them, it's a catastrophe. And we'd rather do so in prescribed burns than in raging wildfires. Yeah, I can't tell you what a just really shocking situation it was when I drove 600 miles, never got out of the smoke, and saw the towns across the western slopes incinerated. I mean, people didn't just lose their housing, like a traditional house fire, but they lost their entire community. They lost their job site. They lost their connections. They lost their school. Anyway, it just brutal impact. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Katie.
That's pretty far ranging. You're hitting on all the things that are close to home for us, for sure. There are some questions building up in the queue regarding the ARA and the PPP loans. I'm going to set that aside just for a minute because I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about the work that you've done on disaster recovery. It's at the top of the mind of everybody who lives in Central Oregon. We're so exposed. As a matter of fact, my kids are on a tour right now of Southern Oregon University, looking at maybe going there next year. And we were driving through Talent and Ashland and Medford and some of the things that happened here. And it's so visceral when you live in the woods or close to it, what this means. And you've done so much great work in this area. How do you see things changing? What are the major strategies that you think are the most important moving forward?
Well, in terms of future fires, we have to think about the fact that we need to really focus on the forests that are near that urban interface, small town interface. I think about how the Millie fire was coming through the pine forest, bearing down on Sisters, and it reached a section that had been thinned, had been mowed, had been gone through, I think, 2 prescribed burns a couple years apart, and the fire just stopped. And not only did the fire not have the fuels to proceed, but the opened up forest enabled the fire crews to get to the fire front much more easily, which hugely helpful. When you have an overgrown forest, it's just moving through that forest can be difficult. So we saw the impact on that. We also know that a lot of those fires started with downed electrical wires. Therefore, it raises the question of, can some of these highly vulnerable lines where towns are surrounded by forest be buried? And Senator Wyden and I have a bill to do a matching grant program to assist states or localities or the local utility districts to be able to harden some of their infrastructure. So that's another approach. We have been able to secure about $250 million for Oregon for wildfire recovery. About 160 million of that was in public assistance. A lot has gone to individual assistance, helping some 25,000 affected Oregonians. About 8 million in rental assistance. You have another 255 survivors who've been approved for temporary housing. You have low interest disaster loans that have helped 32 businesses. So that's $250 million help is quite a bit of help, but I can tell you it's going to be a long, difficult journey to rebuild those communities. And a lot of the families that were completely devastated were folks living in manufactured housing parks. we saw that when the housing was that close together and that flammable, it just, if you hit one and it burned, it set the next one on fire. And so we're gonna have to be thinking about how to, as we rebuild, we need a lot of affordable housing. By the way, there's a plan for, as part of the draft of the Build Back Better, would include funds to construct 1 million low-income housing units or homes. I'd rather say homes, 1 million homes. And we know the need is so huge. And I just look at the cost of a home today, a home that might have cost $14,000 in 1960, that now is a $400,000 home. And that increase has not been matched by income. And so it's really, really brutal situation, and a shortage of affordable rental housing on top of that.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about the housing. Ben was featured, I think, on a CNN documentary, I believe it was, on some of the problems with accelerated growth. And Senator, you and I were on a news conference, I think it was the week before last, and we were talking about recovery and impacts to small businesses with the pandemic. And as you know, we're very much about recreation and visitors and tourism and that sort of thing. And we still have about 3,000 people out of work in those industries, in related industries. And so when we're looking at recovery in that, the ARA is going to offer a lot of immediate relief. But longer term, when you look at those investments in the economy, one of the other key ingredients is, can these people actually live here or even close to here? And can they afford it? And it's something our chamber is spending a lot of time trying to sort through. And it's tough, as you mentioned. I think the median house price right now in Bend is something around $530,000. Blows my mind that it went up 29% in 3 months. And a lot of that is due to result of the pandemic, a lot of folks moving from around the country to Bend because it's an awesome place to be. And now there's a whole group of people, even people that are earning $70,000, $80,000+ a year, who cannot afford to buy a home here. So when you look at the federal stage and that you work in, what do you see coming either with the Build Back Better or other legislation that might help provide relief in communities where housing prices are astronomically above what the median income is? And I know this is a loaded question, and if you have the answer, you win the prize. But just would love to hear your thoughts on a federal level as you look across the country. How are you tackling this? What kind of strategies do you think the BBB will have to help?
So housing will be a significant feature in Build Back Better, but I can't tell you there are a lot of details right now, but a lot of support for affordable rental housing. I'm hoping we'll also view assistance for families to be able to repair structural defects, to be able to stay in their homes. I'm thinking about when I was at Habitat for Humanity, and we not only built homes in the community, but we also repaired homes for families that had significant dysfunction that made the house unlivable, and it created stability for those families to be able to stay where they were. I hope that there is support on the home ownership side as well as the rental side. I really was disappointed at the way the foreclosure happened under the 2008-2009. We didn't come to the assistance of families then. They lost their homes. The homes essentially were resold in blocks to hedge funds at a fraction of what their essential value was. And by that, I mean what could be resold for a year later, 2 years later. which meant there was a massive wealth transfer to the hedge funds. And I pushed President Obama, personally lobbied him to make them available for families to buy at those cut rate prices and at least give like a 1 month opportunity before they were packaged to be sold to a hedge fund. And I lost that battle. The administration wanted to move fast. They had a huge, massive inventory, but that meant a huge number of families, millions of families that could have been empowered through ownership, having a bigger piece of the American dream, lost out. That shouldn't happen again. Meanwhile, we don't want homes to be foreclosed on in the first place. And I'm really worried about all the families who have been able to have forbearance, which helped them get through a crisis. But now when that forbearance ends, they may owe several months, multiple months of mortgage payments. And I really think we need to push for mortgage companies to put that on the back, restructure the mortgage loan, put it on the back of the loan. Otherwise, we just kind of destroy the stability of home ownership, destroy the family's equity in just a way that does nothing but hurt ordinary families. And again, probably will result in a wealth transfer away from ordinary families. Meanwhile, I'm also worried about the rental side. So we have in the bill we just passed $30 billion of rental support. And the idea is help people pay their rent. That helps out the landlord, who can also pay their mortgage. The landlords have said, help us. Well, maybe the best way we can help them is help the tenants make the rental payments. And it's part of the philosophy of trying to build back from the grassroots up, rather than from the Wall Street side down.
Great.
So I don't know that I can share much more about it at this point, because there isn't much more to share.
Right.
I think those of us who are in this housing background world, after I worked at Habitat, I developed affordable housing for several years. And I must say, developing it for a nonprofit was always tricky, because you start with a foreclosed lot and you'd have to get so many different grants compiled into a single project. And we need to make it easier to build those complexes.
Yeah, I really appreciate your insights, and because of your background, I thought you might have a few, and you did. And you also mentioned the ability for folks to build equity. It's something that we think a lot about here, and it leads to home ownership. And there are some experimental approaches to that are hopefully going to be happening here in Bend soon, and already are, where there are shared equity models for nonprofits investing in homes. And then folks sign on for a 3 to 5 year stint and share some of the equity as a down payment for their own home. So people are starting to get quite creative here. And when we look at the Build Back Better program, there's a couple of things that I know that our community is looking at. One is to connect our east side with our west side. When you come to Bend, you know that the parkway kind of just runs right down the middle along with the railway. And building a multimodal bridge that is a socioeconomic connector, a physical connector, will help us also build a lot of affordable and workforce housing, which is key to us surviving the influx of population. And the other project I know we'll be looking at is the Innovation District, which will be a public-private venture over at OSU Cascades that will bring research and jobs and housing and all sorts of great stuff to the west side of the community. So I know there are at least 2 projects that we are looking at that has economic and socioeconomic benefit. So with that, Senator, I really want to be thoughtful of the folks who have been giving us a bunch of great questions in the queue. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go to that section.
Okay.
One person I wanted to point out to you is thanking you for your support of the Medicare payment extensions. That is so important for our community, since healthcare is such a large industry in Central Oregon, and we have such a high density of Medicare covered individuals. So people just appreciating your work in that area. And I wanted to pass that on and say it out loud. And some folks here that are asking questions around the PPP. By the way, thank you. I know you were one of the people who pushed for C6s like Chambers to have access to PPP, which we applied for. It was a rough year, and certainly appreciate that as well. But the questions around how do businesses know if that loan is going to be forgivable or not? I know that when you submit your application, you have to wait 90 days to hear back whether or not the items that you identified as your loss of income and wages would qualify. But is there anything else that you might suggest to folks that are asking in the queue? How do I find out sooner rather than later whether my PPP will be forgiven or not?
The best thing I can say is call Jake. Jake's on the screen, wave your hand again. Jake was helping so many businesses apply and helping so many chambers help their members apply, get answers. We've had so many different chapters of the PPP in the first round, second round, shifting qualifications, more flexibility, more timelines to change. So it's been a continuously moving item. And a lot of the questions about forgiveness depend on interpretation, and we got to get that information from basically from Treasury. And sometimes the existing information they've already handed out will help answer the question, but it's very specific to the, well, if I have done this, which I've done, will this qualify? And I can't really say much more than each question is probably got unique circumstances that have to be checked.
Great.
And Jake, I'll just invite Jake to see if he wants to add anything to that because he's
real quick, Senator.
Yeah.
I was just informed that the vote is starting on the floor and that you're needed.
Okay, it takes me about 5 minutes to do a round trip, so I'll see you all, and then maybe Jake and BJ can give their best sense of their answer to that same question, probably, or Allison.
We'll tread water while you go. Thanks, Senator. So Jake, do you want to get into that process? If you wouldn't mind, if you could share what that process actually looks like. I get questions about the PPP loans all the time. What is the process? Do I spend this money if I think I'm going to have to pay it back? There's a high level of anxiety to folks who are trying this for the first time in particular. Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of Catherine's specific example that she references in her question comment, that finally received PPP for last year's disaster. Glad it finally came through. We've, of course, starting a year ago, have heard from so many people who struggled to find a bank that was available to take them. Maybe their bank that they already do business with wasn't participating. So this has definitely been, as opposed to the EIDLs, which were an application through the SBA directly, PPP, you have to find a lender, credit union, bank. And so that in of itself, I know has been a headache for lots of folks, and offer my sympathy and empathy on that. In terms of this situation where someone has received the money and is now wanting to make sure that they can convert it to a grant, in the same way that you apply for it, you need to go back to the bank, the lender where you got the original loan, PPP loan, to apply for forgiveness. And absolutely happy to help any one of your members, anyone in the community who's having trouble get a hold of their bank. If they're not hearing back, if for some reason they're saying we can't process your forgiveness application, please reach out to BJ, please reach out to me. And we have constituent services folks that are contacting banks on folks' behalf, and we're happy to work through that for anyone who's watching this or listening. And so that's the main message that I would share. But you do have to return to the original lender that you applied and received your PPP from, is the main point I would leave you with.
Okay. Thank you for that. I guess let's if I don't want to get into territory where I know that you folks are probably the keepers of the knowledge. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you, and you guys self-select who gets to answer. So Peggy Carey asked the questions related to housing costs. And we're for nonprofit. We're having a difficult time recruiting labor because people can't afford housing. So again, there's that disconnect between housing and labor. And to a great degree, this is a local issue, but I want to focus on the connection here of folks that are earning their unemployment from the American Rescue Act and prior the American Care Act. One of the things that I hear a lot from businesses is two things. Number one, we can't find people to fill the positions. And the reason why they're giving me is because folks are either afraid to go back to work, or they're earning as much or more on unemployment than they are with their say it's a minimum wage job. So the ARA goes all the way until, I believe it's September 1st. Is that correct? Your unemployment? Am I remembering that?
Yeah, it's extended through the beginning of September, correct.
Okay, so I know that people are going to make their own decisions on this, but there is a labor shortage too, which is funny to say when we know 3,000 people are out there and without jobs. What's your advice to them in getting back to work, and what's your advice to businesses in how we navigate, especially in Bend and Central Oregon, tourism oriented over the summer? What are your insights on navigating through this employment process in trying to find labor, and what you should expect as your unemployment check comes in and as you see an end sight to that? I know that's a wandering question. I'm going to leave it that open so you can kind of comment on what you're seeing in Oregon and maybe across the country, and maybe some insights from that.
Yeah, I'll take that. A few quick thoughts, and then my colleagues can jump in. And with our democracy in action, and the senators probably will be back right as I'm in the middle of answering this, so then I'll pass it to him. So I think there are at least two issues on a macro level. One is, even before this pandemic, there were jobs open in communities across Oregon, including Bend, where they've been open for months or years with no qualified applicants. Typically in ones where you at least needed a certificate or some additional training or skill. And so that is a whole bucket of importance, workforce importance, that even long after extra unemployment benefits expire, we have a lot of work to do as a country on workforce training to make sure that where there are retail jobs, hospitality jobs that may not be coming back as some things were automated, that folks have a pathway to other careers and can begin to fill some of those jobs that many of your members have posted and have received no bites on, even going back before this last year. In terms of the compensation, where some folks are doing better through extra unemployment benefits that the federal government has provided, I think you said it best. It's a combination of their financial situation, the childcare situation, and their health situation. The thing that excites me the most about the American Rescue Plan, too many acronyms, and the senator can jump from here. The thing that excites me the most is that, to me, the number one thing that we can be doing to make it easier for folks to go back to work is for them to feel safe and healthy, both themselves getting a vaccine as soon as possible and knowing that others have received that. If we can do that, I think we're going to see a lot more momentum to people wanting to eat out, more jobs, and so forth. It's not an exact science about the date that we should be pulling these extra unemployment benefits, and we've heard it from many of your members from chambers across the state. So, and then finally, back to what Senator Merkley was mentioning, we have major investments that we need to make in housing so that workforce housing is available for folks somewhere close to their jobs. Senator, it was a question about extended unemployment and how that may deter folks from going back to the workforce.
I think right now it's in place through the first week in September. And so this will become a reconsideration as to whether we extend beyond that. And I think a lot of people are getting the same type of feedback that you're giving us. Of course, the unemployment situation is different in different parts of the country, but you'll start to see programs phased out, and that we have quite a bit of time between now and September, so I'm suspecting that may well be the conclusion of that extra program.
Great. Another question in the queue, hopefully pretty simple. When will the restaurant rescue grant open up? When can people start applying for that?
Well, it's a question for the executive branch. I don't know if they've put out any guidance on that yet. Do we know, team? Have we heard?
I
I'm
don't
seeing
believe any
no.
guidance is available yet. No, I'm sorry.
So
No, we don't have.
the latest that we had as of a week and a half ago was within a few weeks. We're running through this exact same issue with the shuttered venue operators program grants, in which they did finally just recently give a date certain, I believe April 8th or thereabouts, where they'll begin accepting applications. But we don't have an exact date on the restaurant relief yet. But we'll keep pushing the administration to get it out as soon as possible.
Thank you.
The exact date of a day or thereabouts, meaning we don't have an exact time on it. But
I
know the
believe yesterday
administration-
is the best answer.
Yes, no, that would be great. And I mean, they have a huge incentive to move quickly, but whenever we create one of these new programs, the systems do take a little while to put it in place. It's both the details on how they'll be run and executed, and then the systems for doing the execution. So I know we were hoping instantly. I was really impressed that some of those $1,400 checks went out like the next day after we passed the bill, because the system was already in place for that. And boom,
Yeah.
out they went. I will have to note that I can probably take one more question, then I have to run across Capitol Hill for another meeting.
Okay.
So I apologize. I'm not sure if the team can stay on for a little longer or not.
I really appreciate this. So Senator, there's one a question in the queue that's very different than the rest. Senators Duckworth and Hirono have indicated there are no votes on all non-diversity nominees from the administration, that they will vote only for racial minority LGBTQ nominees. What's your position on that?
Well, my position is to evaluate each and every nominee and see if they are their background is appropriate to the position. To keep pressing the administration to make sure the diversity of our appointees reflects the diversity of America. And I know the administration has been hearing a lot on the fact that that they haven't met all the points that we'd hope they could meet. Probably done better than any administration in American history, but so we're kind of challenging them to do even in better. And it's really been discouraging to see that the major targets of the minority in the Senate have been women of color who've been nominated for positions. It's a pattern that nobody's missed, and hoping to raise awareness of that and really have all of our colleagues think about whether they have inherent, maybe they're unaware that they may have prejudices affecting their judgment that they need to ponder.
Yep. Senator, before you leave, and thank you so much for your time today, I also wanted to thank you for all the work you're doing on childcare. I know you and I chatted about this before, and the absolute importance of a long-term solution to finding a stable funding source and just rethinking children as students from the time they're born all the way through the end of school. And you've done great work in this area, and I wanted to thank you for that.
You're very welcome. And Katie, I have a closing question for you.
Sure.
What mountain is behind me?
Oh man, is that Broken Top? Looks
Does
like
that
it.
help?
Looks like Broken Top.
South Sister.
South Sister. There you go.
South Sister. My daughter and I went camping just to the north of this lake. I think it's called Green Lake. And so you could see Broken Top, you could see South Sister. I didn't take this picture, but it's very similar to one I took. We were the only two people out there in the wilderness on a rainy day, and the next morning we woke up to blue skies and a beautiful sunrise that looked much like this. So
That's
really,
lovely.
really, really great moment. So you do live in a beautiful part of the world. I understand how come everybody wants to live there. So I look forward to visiting you all there in person next year. Thank you all. and take care. And I'm not sure, team, are you staying on for a little longer if possible? Yes, you are. Okay, great.
Senator, thank you.
And,
In fact, I have actually camped up at Green Lakes. I should have recognized that.
and Katie, just one follow-up on the question about nominations.
Yes.
Senators Duckworth and Hirona actually removed that position a day or two ago. They wanted to highlight the lack of Asian Americans nominated so far to high-level positions. They discussed that with the Biden administration and have a liaison now appointed on that exact issue. And so they've removed that threat as well. And so that shouldn't be an issue for getting Biden administration nominees through.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive, the lineup that has come out of this administration. So I guess one final comment or question. We at the Chamber post all the announcements as they happen with live links to applying, for example, the restaurant fund and unemployment, et cetera. So when you folks hear of any movement in these areas, we always look for BJ's emails coming out to us. And for those of you who are still with us, and we post that on centraloregonsos.com. It's a website we collaborated with all 6 other Central Oregon chambers to put up. We did it in like 5 days back in March of 2020. And it's essentially just a website for employers and employees and community. And it's just hosting a whole bunch of live links. So if everyone can put that on your browser, centraloregonsos.com, we try and keep that updated as much as possible. And we'll be in touch with BJ and the rest of the folks here to make sure that when funds get freed up, that this happens quickly and you get the live link as quickly as possible. One last comment. I know that I've been asked many times is just the speed at which the municipalities will be receiving their funds. And I know there's not a heck of a lot you can do necessarily from the federal level, but we experienced here in Oregon a pretty significant delay in the disbursement of funds to municipalities, childcare, and some other sectors. And oftentimes there's really good reasons for that, but just reemphasizing the need for these funds to get into the hands of the people and the municipalities who need them as quickly as possible. Was there anything in this piece of legislation in the American Recovery Plan that encouraged dissemination, speed of dissemination?
I'm going to defer to Allison on that one.
Yeah, I will say there was no specific language on dissemination, as Senator Merkley mentioned, because these systems have already been propped up before. There's already been a dissemination of relief to states and localities in a previous iteration that perhaps we'll expect to see it a little bit sooner. I think a couple weeks ago we were also told that it would be made available within. I think they were saying within the next. And now I'm trying to think back, but I think they were hoping to have it within about 60 days from Treasury, and then certainly recognize that there's state involvement and there may be other places where there's slowed down. But I think there was a real desire to move rapidly, just recognizing the need to make up for these lost revenues in large part. So apologies not to have something more specific.
That's okay.
Yep. I confirm the 60-day number. It was originally talk of 50 and now 60 from when it was signed into law. So that would put us in May. I think there's every incentive for President Biden's administration to move as quickly as possible. They understand that the quicker this money gets out, the better it is for everyone, the economy, businesses, people. Their administration will benefit politically if people are doing better. So, but by all means, we want to stay in contact with you as we did last year, where there are things not moving. We're happy to reach out to the administration and raise the alarm.
Super. I want to thank each of you for being here. I know that the sport team is so important. Oftentimes when I've been in DC, I understand who's actually running the country. And you folks are such a great support team to our U.S. Senator. And we're grateful for everything you do for us And thanks again for your time. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and to Ben Broadband for sponsoring this content, to all of our members and everyone in Central Oregon. And I just want to thank you again, and everyone stay safe and well, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.